Yeah, so we'll get started because we're going to start today. Here's the sort of quick agenda. We're going to start today with just some comments from Cameron, our executive director of the league. And then we're going to head to Department of Workforce Services, Housing and Community Development. Alyssa Gamble is going to talk a little bit about the subdivision consultant pool. Then we're going to ask you a few quick questions, and then we're going to jump into your technical questions with Q&A. So with that, our focus today is on helping you get the tools you need to meet the requirement for the subdivision updates. And Cameron, I will switch it to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Meg. And thank you everybody for joining today, both on the state side and on the local side. I'm going to make a few key comments to set the stage, and then I will turn it over to the experts at the state and local level who can answer your questions on the technical side. My comments right now are going to focus on the political and policy sides. Last year, with the passage of SB 174, House Bill 406, and House Bill 365, there was a lot of emphasis on trying to improve the overall land use process on both the property owner side as well as on the local government side. These bills were heavily negotiated. There was significant deliberation, and at the end of the day, the League Policy Committee, which includes mayors, council members, and senior staffers from across the state, ultimately voted to support those bills. And a key component of those bills were the modifications to the subdivisions process. Now, if you go back in time, almost 20 years now, right, Todd and Meg, to the drafting of LUDMA, one of the gaps of LUDMA from that initial drafting was that it did not have a consistent approach to how to handle subdivisions. And so what SB 174, House Bill 406, and 365 did was address a lot of different land use pieces, but particularly creating a consistent process around subdivisions, both the approval process as well as the infrastructure improvement process, with the expectations for both the private sector, the property owner side, and the public sector side. We knew at the time it was going to be a heavy lift for local governments, every last one of them, cities and counties across the state, to go through their ordinances and update them to be consistent with this law. And the legislature, to their credit, and the Property Rights Coalition, to their credit, agreed that we needed more than the standard 2 months between the end of the session and a normal effective date of a bill. As a result, there are two key deadlines. Deadline number one being February 1st for communities that are required to do moderate income housing plans. Generally speaking, those are your cities above 5,000, with some exceptions. Those communities have to update their subdivision ordinances to be consistent with state law by February 1st. And then all other communities have to update it by the end of calendar year 2023. So two-tiered calendars. Hopefully none of that is new. Hopefully for everybody on the call, you're nodding your head saying, thanks, Cam, for telling us what we already knew, because we've been talking about this for months. But recognizing that February 1st is 2 months away, here's my urgent plea for everybody on the call. The legislature is watching. The legislature and state leaders are watching to see if local governments meet that February 1st deadline. The legislature provided the technical assistance money to help communities, and that money is now available. And part of the call today is trying to connect all the dots so that you as a community, if you need that technical assistance money, know how you can access it, and then answer any additional questions you have, because it's not an overnight process to bring your subdivisions ordinances up to speed and be consistent with state law. We want to be able on February 1st to tell state leaders that every community that needed to meet that deadline met that deadline. So part of what we're going to be gathering from the call today is how many of you are already underway in that process, and then who isn't, and then how do we help get everybody across that finish line on February 1st. And then if you don't make the February 1st deadline, why not? What was the reason why? Because there's a lot of political credibility on the line for us with other bills that we are currently negotiating around housing and land use and other things. And our ultimate objective is always to respect the role of local governments, seek collaboration, and focus on outcomes that result in the quality of life of all of our collective constituents. And so the more we can demonstrate that we have done our task in meeting these deadlines, the more credibility we have at the Capitol as we are negotiating on these other items. Let me stop there. Meg, Todd, Carson, Molly, anything any of you want to add just on the political piece before I wrap up?
No, you summarized it well. And just a reminder, we have February 1st for the cities that are within the moderate income housing program parameters, and then the rest of the state is at the end of the year. And Alyssa can probably go over that, and I'm going to hand that off to Alyssa now with housing and community development. And I also dropped into the chat the link to the consultant pool for you all to take a look at. Thank you, Cameron.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg and Cameron. I also have dropped a link into the chat. This is a link to the DWS information page about the subdivision ordinance consultant pool. So right now we have 6 total consulting groups that can provide you assistance. We are in the process of working through another RFP to actually add additional consultants to that pool to serve the communities in the state. So those additional consultants will be coming online here in the next month or two. And then we have actually had quite a few questions about how communities can actually access these funds. You will be best served by going to that link that Meg provided. That's the list of the current consultants in the pool, which you can just contact. They are folks that have been approved through an RFP process by the state to provide this technical assistance to communities. And by contacting them, working with them to set a timeline and initiate that work, that's all that you would need to do to access the funds. Housing and community development will actually pay the consultant directly, as opposed to paying you, the community, and then having you, the community, pay the consultant. So we have worked to streamline this so it's more efficient and allows your community to get the technical assistance that's needed. There are caps by community class, which you can see in the subdivision ordinance consultant pool link that I provided. But basically, if you are a first or second class community, you will have access to kind of a lower amount of funds as opposed to those 3rd, 4th, and 5th class communities, which do have some additional funding for that technical assistance.
I'm just going to jump to the chat questions while you had a breath there. The first sort of question there was and I don't know if you can see them there in there. Mm-hmm. The parameters for communities not. Oh no, and that's the next one. Sorry. It's basically can you use a consultant outside of the pool was the first question.
Great question. In order to receive funding from HCD, the consultant would have to be approved and in the pool. If the community wants to pay independently for their own consultant of their choice, they're welcome to do that. There's no requirement that you utilize the pool, but you do have to utilize the pool if you want access to the funds for the technical assistance.
And I might add, Alyssa, the RFP is open again, so if there's consultants who are interested, they can apply for the RFP to be approved, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And then I think we'll get to the other ones after you're done. We'll jump into those comments. Those were just about the pool, I think, at the moment that I saw.
No, I think that was kind of the summary of the high level for the how communities can access the funds and who all we have in the pool. There are a few consultants that are in the pool that are actually on this call. So like I said, I would recommend looking at their contact information, reaching out, getting an idea of what would be the best fit for your community.
Great, thanks. And then we had a question in there for the folks that don't have the earlier deadline coming up in February. You have the same parameters under the statute, but your deadline is December 1st of 2024. So hopefully that clarifies that. And I have also dropped into the chat the ULCT resource page where we have summary of the bill. We have a kind of outline of parameters that you need to hit in a type of an ordinance sample form, and other resources there that may assist you as well. So Carson, and I know there's some other questions in the chat, but we will get to those when we open up the Q&A. Carson, would you like to do the questions that we have prepared right now?
Yeah, thank you, Meg.
Yeah, and thanks, Melinda, on the call. I saw you there. Thanks for nodding us to do this.
Would not be a ULCT webinar without some Slido questions. Well, we just have four quick questions. The first will just be gauging progress. Just asking me whether you're on track or not. That will be, we won't show results for that. We just want to know how we're doing performance wise, and so we can help communities who need more assistance. Then the other three questions will be on substance and the kind of approach you're taking. So I'll give everybody a second to scan into the Slido. It'll just ask for your name. You can put your city as well if you felt more comfortable with that. Again, we just want to be able to identify the cities who need more assistance in this process. All right, well, I will move on to the first question, and then that will have the link will still be there as well. So if you haven't been able to join, you'll still be able to. If you're not able to get the QR code to work, you can go to slido.com and then enter that number. Sometimes that works a little bit better than the QR code. I see we've got 20 responses so far. We'll give people just another few minutes. Hoping to get to at least 30 responses here. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. All right, so this question is your city creating a new land use entity to perform subdivision review. And some entities or some cities might already have a different entity, but this is really focused on how you're implementing SB 174. So if you're looking to create that. Give it just another minute to get up to 26 results again. Right. So the next question, is your city planning to take preliminary subdivision approval to the planning commission?
Interesting.
Alrighty, and then we'll go to the last question. Is your city planning to administratively approve preliminary applications? And I'll mention, these will both help us kind of understand the policy targets a little bit better, but we'll share these results with participants so you can kind of see what other cities are looking at on this webinar. And it might also help guide some conversation once we get into the next part of this training.
Great. Thank you, Carson. Yeah, that's interesting about taking it to the planning commission still, but we can unpack that in a minute. So I guess at this point, we have a couple of initial questions in the chat, and that's where we would ask you to do them since it is webinar format. And we're going to bring Todd Godfrey in now, who's been magnificently handling the subdivision updates for us, and have him help us also answer from the technical standpoint. Let's just go right to the head of it, and we will take Jamie's question there, which is some frustration and a question, but just kind of thinking, has anyone else found this language to be counterintuitive and impractical? And I guess, Jamie, maybe if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. And Todd, maybe if you would like to talk for a second about, I know there's frustration about changes and things like that, but really I think our attempt is to try to clean up some of the inconsistencies we found from this year and try to make it more streamlined. But I'll turn that over to Todd to take that one.
Yeah, Jamie, your question, has anyone else found it to be counterintuitive and impractical? Yes, people have. So the biggest issue I think we're seeing is there's not clarity in the law about when the review cycle restrictions, the 4 review cycles, is to be applied, whether that's at preliminary or final. I have been advising my clients that it is intended to apply, in my opinion, at the final plat, not at the preliminary, and that to make your ordinances functional, I think you need to shift the heavy engineering review part of your subdivision review to match those review cycles. So that should be at final. That is one of the issues that's being discussed that may very well end up being amended in the statute. If the statute is amended to address that, I believe it's going to allow cities to choose where you want that engineering heavy review, whether you want it at the preliminary stage or at the final stage. And the 4 cycle review restriction will go with the engineering review, wherever that is. Yes, that's frustrating. I hate to have folks out amending ordinances right now, knowing that we may change the state statute. I think that the majority of cities do have the engineering heavy review at the final stage. So I hope the impact, if that change is made, isn't a really broad impact across the state. But I think that's the answer to that question, the best I can give it to you today.
Okay, well, Jamie can rebut in there, and we'll maybe jump if she has any other follow-up questions on that. I think it was Mark who's asking, are special type subdivision applications, e.g., cluster subdivisions, PUDs, subject to the 4 review cycle?
And I think the practical answer is yes, but I want to give a caveat of how I'm telling my clients. A lot of our planned development subdivision applications, and I would say any kind of a PUD, a lot of the conservation subdivision applications, there's a legislative element to those decisions frequently that either applies the PUD overlay or approves a PUD plan or approves the conservation subdivision part of an application. that legislative part, I am advising my clients to separate out from the administrative subdivision review. So what that looks like in my cities is if someone is applying for a subdivision and they want a PUD overlay to it, there is going to be frequently, not always, but frequently, some council action. If you have a PUD overlay that's a zone, it has to go to the council. That's being done in a separate process from the subdivision. And if it's done after the administrative part of the administrative subdivision is subject to and conditioned on the council approval of that legislative step. Most of my clients are opting to do that legislative step before they go to a planning commission or an administrative land use entity for the preliminary subdivision. So those are being separated out. Now, if you have elements in a subdivision application that aren't single family, two family, or townhome product, they aren't necessarily subject to the process restrictions of the statute. How you separate that out, I think, is a little bit of an issue. Most of my clients have made an election that they're not really going to try, and they're going to process those the same way they do a single family, two family, or townhome product. So yes, there are some special types or issues associated with subdivision that aren't necessarily subject to this part. If again, keep those legislative processes separated. I think that's the only way I could clearly advise to do it. Then when you get down to the subdivision part, even those could be subject to the 4-cycle review if they're single family or multi, two family or townhome product. Mark, I hope that answered your question.
And I think you answered it, but Carla's just reiterating again, the four review cycles. Where are they? What is it? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the cleanup.
Yeah, so the question that's in the chat is, are you saying we can have more than 4 at the preliminary? I'm not advising my clients that way, but there isn't technically a restriction on the review other than it says a 15-day turnaround for the preliminary. So keep that in mind. Then you get to the 20-day and the review cycles for the final. At least that's the way I'm reading the statute. On concurrent reviews, I'm advising my clients that are willing to do the concurrent reviews that they should apply the 20-day review and do the 4-cycle review with that, like they would at the final. That's the way I'm reading the statute.
Okay. Thank you for that, Todd. And then there was some comment, and Melinda was the one who had asked us to ask some of these questions. And there was one that was interesting to me too in there. And I think maybe if you drop your comments in the chat, and it was, why are you taking this to the Planning Commission? What was your policy choices? And I think there was one response about transparency. But we would be interested to see what that decision was, since you don't have to do that option, what the choice was at your local level. And then we've got another one from Carla. She gets that, and they're taking it up for adoption tonight. Let's hope so. Good luck, Carla.
Yeah.
Melinda can talk. Yeah, Carson, if she wants to. Does she want to pipe in? I think you're on mute, Carson. Yeah.
Melinda, you should be able to talk.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for me, I think the biggest question is, the reasoning for taking this to Planning Commission, in my mind, just doesn't make sense. And there's a few reasons why. And maybe I am not understanding the statute correctly, but I understand transparency and fully support that. But if you're taking it to Planning Commission, is that more of just like a token agenda, having that on the agenda, versus like actually having comments from the Planning Commission that you include in that 15-day turnaround time? Oftentimes we do get comments from the public and they have absolutely nothing to do with the administrative approval. I was at a public meeting just the other night, and thankfully it wasn't Kaysville City, it was Davis Tech. But the lady was like, why are we here if you're not going to listen to us and change the outcome? It's just placating. And so that's kind of what I think putting it on the planning commission agenda would amount to, is you put that there, people expect that they can come and comment and that their comments can influence an outcome. And when you have to cite code in comments that you get back to the developer, or you only have 15 days to turn those comments around, timing to get on an agenda within 15 days could be very problematic. So those are some of the thoughts that I had, and would just love to hear rationale from others.
So I'll take a stab at some of those issues, Melinda. I'm not advising my clients that the 15-day for preliminary includes a planning commission review. So when an application normally comes in, your staff looks at it, and if you were taking subdivisions to your planning commission, it then would go onto a planning commission agenda for review. I'm reading the 15 days as the staff time to review the application and respond to an applicant to tell them you're on an administrative land use authority's agenda for X date. But that 15 days does not have to be within, it doesn't have to include the planning commission or the administrative land use authority's review. That's the first point I would make. And I have not had anybody from the development community take issue with that. So I know that's not clear in the statute, but no one has taken issue with that particular approach. On your second question about these, putting something in front of the public, again, a public hearing is not required for subdivisions. You can have one, but it's not required. And for those cities that are holding on to that public hearing requirement, I would say I think it's very important that you undertake some good meeting management protocols with your subdivision public hearings. And I think that means explaining to the public before the hearing starts the kind of input that is valid for your planning commission to consider. And that input really is restricted to, does this application meet the city's ordinances? In that context, I think it's odd, to Melinda's point, I think it's odd that we continue to hold these public hearings, but I know we've established a practice in this state that subdivisions go before the public. I know that's been a hard cycle to break, but I think if you're going to continue to hold those public hearings, that meeting management part of the practice is really critical.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, that separation between legislative and administrative, we have on the Land Use Academy of Utah website a quick video that you can also always play, just to reiterate the lanes that you're in, and that may or may not help the public and your planning commissions.
Meg, can I add one last piece to that too?
Yes.
Both you and Todd are spot on here. And there's been a lot of discussion in the last two sessions about further clarifications in code around legislative and administrative authorities and who exercises that authority. We've seen some of that occur in other state legislatures. So my point is, I don't think this dialogue ends with subdivisions. I think in the years to come, we'll continue to have discussions around administrative land use process, the decision-making process, the role of the public, all of those pieces, because there's a lot of interest at the Capitol of better clarifying that process, which ultimately does provide more clarity to the public. And Todd's right, like there's been long-standing practice to take this administrative land use to a public hearing where the public can participate. Just because we've done it that way doesn't make that a reason to continue doing it. And there are a lot of state leaders who would prefer we not do that in other administrative functions. That didn't come into the subdivisions bill. So Todd, anything else on that front?
No, I think you've hit that point well, Cam. Jamie, I see your question about construction plans to the planning commission as part of the preliminary approval. I have not necessarily read the existing statute to require the submission of, and I guess I would say construction heavy plans at the preliminary stage. I think it is normal, and I think it's standard in most of our cities, that there is some level of engineering detail that comes with the preliminary. But, and I don't know, when I say most, it may be 51%. I think it's more than that, but I think most of our cities are doing construction and engineering plan heavy review at the final stage right now. So that is something that's being looked at for a change to the statute now. But I think if we get a change, it's going to allow cities to determine where you want that engineering heavy review to occur, whether at the preliminary or the final stage. I will tell you, I have hesitancy putting significant engineering and construction detail in front of planning commissions. I don't know that that's where we really want to go. So.
Yep. And then, Todd, we had another question from our friend up in Brigham, Paul, just wondering about what your advice is on that. This was the earlier conversation.
I'm looking for Paul's comment. Oh,
yeah.
Is he asking about the inclusion of planning commission action being part of the 15 or 20 day cycle?
I believe so. Is that right, Paul? Yes.
I think with the changes that are being made, that will be clarified. It wasn't, we didn't set out specifically to address that because I haven't had folks raising that issue broadly, but I think with the changes that are being proposed now, that will be addressed.
Great. Okay, I know we have a lot of folks on there. I see my friends from Alta, from Highland, from Alpine. Anyone have any questions? Or everyone's got it all locked up and ready to go, and we've got an approval up tonight for Carla. So any other questions we're here to ask and help you with? We've hopefully put together these resources for you, but any other questions while you have the esteemed lawyer Todd here to help answer you and navigate those through? All right, well, I'll let you guys think about that for a little bit. And I guess one of the things, again, we've reiterated, we've got a February 1st deadline, which I know you all meet. If you somehow are a few days late and an applicant comes to the window, you need to default to state code, which Todd, I don't know if we want to go down there and way to handle that, but you do need to have it in place by then. And for the rest of you, you'll have some models and some ideas that we'll be willing to put out and share with you on this subdivision resource page on the league as you undertake the round to comply with the December 1st, 2024 deadline. And I don't know, Todd, if you want to speak to any other pending legislation that would be effective that might alter that, or if it's too soon to do that.
And then maybe have a couple more questions that have popped up in the chat.
Great, I see them, yep.
I think it may be a little too soon, Meg.
Okay. And then again, the consultant, can we utilize the consultant pool without an RFP? If we have an existing relationship with an attorney in the pool, you can, but you just can't get reimbursed. Is that how you read that, Alyssa?
I think Paul's asking if Brigham City has to do a specific RFP process.
I see.
And Paul, I think that's probably a subject to your ordinances. And as a general rule, I would say no. As a general rule, in most city ordinances, professional services are excluded from or carved out in a separate process for that type of application. So I would say in most ordinances, no. I would think you're probably not restricted by some kind of complicated RFP process at the local level.
I would also remember that it's the state has issued the RFP for the consultants, and it is the state that's actually providing the payment for those folks. So for sure, you will need to rely on your local ordinances as you engage these parties. But all we require from the consultant in order to confirm that the consultant and the city have decided to move forward and work together on the subdivision ordinance updates is an MOU just stating that the consultant and the community are working together. That's all that we would need. I don't think that there would be a need for an RFP from the city.
And then Todd, Nancy has a question about using the mayor for
So I think that's a more complicated question than you might generally imagine. My advice to you, if you want to do that, would be that you need to create some good layers with the Ethics Act to make sure that that ends up being a valid process. So I think you would need to, and if you want, Nancy, you can call me and we can talk about how you actually do this. I think there is a way where you could make it work, but I do think there's some Ethics Act and some transparency things that would have to be taken care of to make that possible. And I appreciate the issues in Paragona, trust me.
And to that same extent, and then I'm just going to ask Alyssa, there's a couple of questions about the state RFP. Can you either drop that in the chat or answer that next? But Todd, there's one from Scott talking about the challenges for small communities with a 15-day review period.
Yeah, and so part of the revision to the subdivision statute that is being contemplated right now and that we really are hopeful we can get enacted is a bit of a longer process for our smaller communities. So that's on the table, that's being discussed now. We're hopeful that that happens because we recognize that your circumstance is very different there. We're hoping to bump that 15-day period out for some of our smaller towns.
And then Alyssa's going to work on the links. And then Deborah has a question, am I exempt? And the answer is no. This applies to the entire state of Utah. There are just classifications based on deadline for compliance. And you would have until December 1st of 2024. And while we're kind of maybe waiting for some other questions, Cameron, did you want to add anything at this point, or do you want to wait a little bit for that?
I've got some closing comments I wanted to make. So if
Okay.
questions are still coming in, let's keep answering the questions.
Okay. So I know, Scott, I know we know that's going to be hard. As Todd said, we're working on trying to see if we can make some changes this year on that review period. Any other questions? I don't see any coming in on the chat. Any other thoughts from any of our panelists that you'd like to add? Okay. Well, we are available. Myself, I can relay either to Todd or Carson. We have the resource page on the ULCT website. Again, Alyssa also has provided, and she can drop her information in there if you have any other questions for her.
Meg,
Yep.
there's a question in the chat about how the funds are distributed. Do they go from the state directly to the consultant, or do they go to the city or town? They go directly to the consultant. So if somebody selects our office to do the help, we'll sign essentially a one-page retainer letter with you and go to work, and all of our invoicing goes directly to the state. So and the payment comes directly from the state.
Great, thank you. I was just ignoring Chris because he's from Alta and I thought he was skiing today. So thanks for catching that.
And then I just wanted to clarify the question about the RFP. I am happy to provide the link, but if you are looking for consultants that you can just reach out to start the work, That's actually included on the links that were provided earlier in this meeting. I'll just drop them back in the chat here. But down at the very bottom of this page is consultant pool contact information, and that will be updated as potential new consultants are added. If any information changes with any of the consultants, we'll be updating that as well. Okay, perfect, Jay. I will get that for you.
Great. And then for those on the call that are from the communities outside of the moderate income housing plan communities that have the early deadline of February, we will be doing more training in the spring. We will be trying to provide more assistance, but when we so don't feel like this is the last the last time you're going to hear from us, and please reach out to us, whatever we can do to try to assist you. At the end of the day, it is your heavy lift, but we're here to help you try to do that. Cameron, did you want to? I think we're if we don't have more questions, we can wrap this up and let people get to drafting up the ordinance and getting on their way to approval.
Yeah, there you go, Meg. A couple of things I just wanted to hit before everyone departs. First, thank you for the hard work that you're doing to update your ordinances. As I mentioned at the top of the call, there is a lot of political credibility on the line for local governments to demonstrate that we are complying with these changes. And we, from a political perspective, we are constantly advocating to respect the role of local governments, and particularly the role of our elected officials. This coming session will be no different. There are going to be a lot of bills that are going to impact land use and local government responsibilities. Last year, we worked on 240 bills that impacted cities and towns in some way. So there's always going to be a lot. That's just the nature of our legislature and the growth challenges that we're facing in this state. Again, the legislature heard us last year, and we said we needed technical assistance money to help with communities. And our hope is that this will be a success story that we can go back to the legislature and say, if we're going to do these types of changes, that the state needs to provide the financial resources to help. So again, the better story we have to tell come January when the session starts, the better outcomes we're going to be able to have politically there. This coming session, there will be a cleanup bill that Todd has referenced for the small cities that are under 5,000. As we were traveling the state in the spring doing our legislative recaps, we heard you loud and clear that if you don't have staff or you have small communities, it's hard to meet the deadlines. Even with the additional months to come in compliance, it's still hard to meet that period. And to the credit of the Property Rights Coalition, they've acknowledged that. And so we're just trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but we have heard you, and we are trying to make some of those changes as part of the cleanup bill. There will be other bills in the land use space. There will be bills this coming session around the regulation of modular housing or offsite construction. There could be bills around the moderate income housing plans again and the requirements therein. And there will be other land use technical bills that we're still working through, and we'll be providing an update for those at the next Legislative Policy Committee meeting, which every city is entitled to participate in. Even if you're not the voting member from your city, you can still log in and listen or attend. The next Legislative Policy Committee meeting will be Monday, December 11th. And so, Scott, to your question of the population of 11,000, the cleanup, there are multiple pieces to that cleanup bill. The piece that I was referencing are the additional timeframes for non-MIHP communities. In your case, 11,000, you are an MIHP community. And so the cleanup will look different for you because you have the moderate income housing plan requirement because you're in an urban area in the Escash Valley, a little different than the Wasatch Front, but it's still a high growth area. So there will be some cleanups there that will help everybody from North Logan to St. George. The piece I was referencing was specific to the communities that have no staff whatsoever. We also have the local administrative advisor program that is just now getting underway. That and other technical assistance programs that the legislature has funded. So we're trying to get as many state resources as possible to help communities, not just in the subdivision space, but beyond. The other thing that we are actively working on is a toolkit around missing middle housing to help local government leaders and the development sector figure out how to make missing middle housing type projects work. That can be a way to show compliance with modern income housing plan requirements. I bring all that up because inevitably there are going to be bills that undermine or erode local government authority. We've seen those in many other states. We've seen other states where they have really taken away the authority of local government leaders. And I'm quite proud of the bills that we've worked on over the last few years, because I think we have been able to find the balance of respecting the role of cities, but also expecting more of cities and partnering with the state on the growth challenges that we are facing. So the work is never done, and I appreciate the great work that's happening at city halls across the state, and we want to be here to help you, and we want your feedback. We capture every chat comment in every one of our meetings to make sure that staff sees it, and it helps inform our negotiations and deliberations. So thank you for that. My last item is, if you're not receiving Friday Facts, please make sure you sign up. You can sign up directly on our website, or if you're not receiving it, just put your email address in the chat room right now, and we can get you signed up. We will have the link to the Legislative Policy Committee on the 11th in Friday Facts, as well as on our website. We also, prior to December 11th, we'll have our newly elected training, our elected officials essentials training for new council members and mayors on Saturday, December 9th. There's information at the, that'll be on Friday Facts and on our website there too. Melinda, I'm very pleased that the bugs have been worked out for you. When we switched delivery platforms, we, for whatever reason, you got bumped, but we still love you, Melinda. So I'm glad that you're getting the emails now. And if you're not getting the emails, again, put your address in here. I see several from Apple Valley to Woodland Hills. Mayor Van Wagner, thanks for your comments as always. So we're here to serve you. Please make sure you're staying in touch with us, and make sure you're getting Friday Facts. Watch for more resources, and hopefully we'll see some of your electeds at the Elected Officials Essentials Training or at LPC in December, and we'll have more information at Friday Facts.